first of all, welcome everyone and thank you for joining our webinar, Step-by-Step Migration Guide from Layer to SendBird. After hearing so many stories about a lack of reliability and stability regarding Layer's chat API, our development team created a sync server migration plan to help customers migrate from Layer to SendBird and avoid any disruption to their service or chat data loss. And we're very happy to say that not only were we able to help several Layer customers move to a more stable and reliable service, but we also helped our customers with overall improvement in their chat engagement and adoption with better user experiences. So this webinar and the content of this webinar is designed to give you insights on that migration process so we can help you too. My name is Grace and I'm the Customer Marketing Manager at SendBird, and today we're joined by a few other amazing folks here at SendBird. Do you guys want to give a quick introduction?
Sure. So I'm Janna. I'm a Solutions Engineer here at SendBird, and I'll be leading you guys through the migration today.
Hi, I'm Alex. I am also a Solutions Engineer here at SendBird, and I will be assisting in helping out with the Q&A part.
So let me give you a quick agenda that will be covering today's webinar. So we'll start off with a very quick intro to SendBird, and then we'll dive right into how we can safely and quickly migrate your data from Layer to SendBird. This process encompasses two key topics, the batch migration and our sync server. And once we've gone over the high-level content, we'll tell you how to get started with SendBird. The last 15-20 minutes or so will be reserved for the live Q&A, but we also want you to feel free to engage with us throughout the presentation. Alex is here to answer any of your questions. And the way you do that is if you look at your Zoom screen, on the bottom center, there's a Q&A button, and you can directly ask us questions on that as well. I also want to remind you guys that this webinar is being recorded. We will send this recording in a follow-up email shortly after the webinar concludes. So SendBird, most of you guys are already quite familiar with us, but let me just give you a quick overall information intro to SendBird. So SendBird is the #1 chat API in the world. We were founded in 2013 and backed by some of the largest VCs. Our HQ is in San Mateo, and our APAC headquarters are in Seoul, Korea. We have a total 6 global offices and very quickly growing. Currently, we have 57,000 developers building with SendBird, which translates to about 70 million monthly active users who are sending over 1 billion messages a month. Some of the largest companies across a number of various industries and verticals around the world have trusted SendBird for their migration process from Layer. Some of these customers include Keep Truckin', Hinge, Dubizzle, American Kennel Club, and more. So Hinge is one of the first and largest Layer customers to migrate to SendBird. Hinge is one of the largest dating apps in the world, owned by Tinder and Match Group, for those of you that haven't heard about it. So Hinge has a very active user base, and they could not update their apps instantly given their very large scale. And to ensure a seamless migration, we applied a two-pronged approach. The first is a batch migration of all past data, and the second is a sync server to carry out data updates in real time. So as a result, Hinge's message data was transferred with zero interruption to its service or user experience. They're able to go to market with SendBird within, honestly, days and save significant engineering resources spent on migrating and developing on SendBird. So I'll let Janna take it over from here for the technical deep dive.
Yeah, so thanks for joining us again for the migration talk. So we have 3 main focuses when migrating between chat services. The first main focus is to support a live migration. The second part is to migrate your historical chat data. And then the third would be to relaunch your chat in your web or mobile application actually powered by SendBird. So what do I mean by the live migration? This means that users can still receive messages in real time and gradually phase off of Layer service. And to support this, we built a sync server so that we can carry out data updates in real time. The migration of historical data means that your conversations, users, and messages that are currently in Layer will be migrated over to SendBird via what we call batch migration or backfilling of your data. And then relaunching, we allow you some time to relaunch your app with SendBird. So let's dive deeper into this live migration. So the sync service, as I mentioned before, supports the migration of the customer data in real time between Layer and SendBird. It's a fully managed service, meaning you don't have to worry about the hosting and monitoring of the server infrastructure. We really handle all of this stuff under the hood for you. So it would make it very, very easy to keep track of how well the messages and the flow of chat data is going back and forth between Layer and SendBird. So here in the image on the left, there is the standard chat flow that you may already be familiar with between Layer server and Layer's SDK. So the SDK is just sitting inside your application, such as your mobile app or your web app. And then the Layer server is, the backend that you're communicating with via the SDK to send the chat data to and from. Now, the SendBird Sync server sits in between Layer and SendBird servers. And what happens here is that SendBird Sync server is listening to webhook events that are coming in from Layer's service. So we actually know when a message has been sent on Layer, and then we can do an API call to SendBird server to deliver that message to SendBird. On the SendBird side, similar thing with the SendBird SDK and the SendBird server. So you have the SendBird SDK inside your web or mobile app, and it's communicating with our server side. And the SendBird Sync server also listens to webhook events from the SendBird side and delivers those back to Layer via an API call. So once this live update is set up and running, so that way you have no gap in your data, the SendBird team is going to migrate your data, your historical chat data between Layer and SendBird. So what we do is we take the data that you send to us, that's a raw data export from Layer, and actually convert it into a format that can be read by SendBird and upload it to our servers on your behalf. So to do this securely, we provide an SFTP server, so you can access into your engineering team, or you can access into the SSH into the server and actually transfer that stuff to us securely. This includes your API tokens, all of the historical data, so none of your data is exposed. So things that we migrate over in the backfill migration service is same thing, users, conversations and messages from Layer. In order to get this data export from Layer, they offer a Layer data export API, or you can request a full historical export from Layer's team. Thirdly, you're going to focus on relaunching of chat inside your app with the SendBird SDK. So while SendBird is handling your data migration, the live syncing of your data from Layer to SendBird and the actual historical backfill of your data, your team will have time to focus on the build and release of SendBird in your mobile or web app. To do this, we provide extensive technical documentation on docs.sendbird.com. And of course, our team is going to be here for you if you have any questions as you're migrating, and that could be implementation questions on how to work with SendBird, or if you have any specific questions on the actual parts that are being migrated, we're very happy to help you with that. We have a blog post coming out soon that walks you through Layer's support for like iOS support for Layer Atlas and Atlas Messenger. If you're using Atlas, that was Layer's UI components. Next, let's dive deeper into this migration journey so we can understand at a high level how this all works. So the first step is just creating your apps with SendBird. And this would be on the SendBird dashboard. So you have everything set up with us, you signed up, all this good stuff. Then you're going to generate the export from Layer. And at the same time that you're generating the export, we're going to turn on the sync server. So that way there's no gap between the time that the export happens and the sync server is enabled. The next step is we're going to take your data and transform it, as mentioned before, and upload it to SendBird server. The update to your application, hopefully by this point, will be released, and users will have an opportunity to migrate onto the application that's powered by SendBird. So we recommend a cutoff date for migrations of September 30th. And the main rush here is that Layer service shuts off completely as of October 30th. And we really want to allow your users to have time to, be able to gradually update your app. The SendBird team needs a little bit of time to convert your data, your historical data from Layer to SendBird and upload it to SendBird server, and allow your team to have time to QA that data and make sure everything looks good. We recommend allowing some time to actually send out some notifications to users to prompt them to update their apps in case they don't do that naturally. So let's dive deeper into the timelines. So we have two main timelines here. One is the POC development and testing migration phase, and then right after this, we're going to be talking about the production migration phase. So they kind of go hand in hand in certain ways. So in the first step here, you're going to be creating your SendBird testing and production applications. So your production app, you're not going to be using it at this time, but just getting it all online and getting everything set up as the foundation is a great start. Beginning of the development of your SendBird app with your technical team, and then sharing a sample of your layer message parts with SendBird, so that way if we need to make any adjustments to support your live syncing of data, we can do that. Then we're going to turn on the sync server for staging, and what that means is that under the hood, we have set up two webhook endpoints, one on Layer side, one on SendBird side, and that data can begin syncing back and forth. Everything's registered with the sync server at this point to begin syncing. Then your QA teams will have an opportunity here to review the sync server functionality and make sure that the flow of data is happening just as you expect. So you can start simulating messages on the SendBird side, in your staging application, or on the Layer side, you can start listening to those chat messages coming from Layer. Then this is where we recommend exporting your data from Layer. This is going to be the backfill process, the historical migration, and upload that data set to SendBird via SFTP. As I mentioned before, this is our secure service so that you can upload your data securely to SendBird. What we do at this point is SendBird will take a snapshot of the past X months of historical backfill migration data, and we will upload that to your staging environment. So whether or not you want this to be production data or it can be data from your testing environment, either one is sufficient. We just need to know that it's going to look a lot like your production data if it doesn't already. And finally, the QA teams on both sides are going to be able to have an opportunity to verify that historical data was imported into SendBird properly, and the live migration data is, again, still flowing back and forth and looks nice with that historical data set. Then we move into the production phase. So at this time, when the production phase starts, this is where we're going to finish the development of the SendBird production application with your technical team. This gives us an opportunity to QA with you during this process. So the next part is to turn on the sync server for production. Actually, this step, you can actually do this at the same time as you turn on the sync server for your staging environment. It will just be a one-way sync from Layer to SendBird until your application is released with the SendBird SDK inside. So the export of the data from Layer to SendBird for the backfill component, this can also be the same as the step in the POC stage. However, however you want to export that data, you can do so. So if you want to export data for staging from your staging application over on layer side, you can do that. Or if you want to export the data from layer all at once in bulk, just be sure the sync server is turned on for production at that time, right before you export. Then SendBird will perform the historical backfill into your production application. The QA teams on both sides, SendBird side and your side, will be able to verify that the data looks good and the live migration is happening already from layer to SendBird. Then once you're ready, you can release your web and mobile applications with the SendBird SDK. This is where we wait. So we wait for your users to have mobile adoption or update, see the updates rolling out on your website. And then the migration will be ended after this time. So ideally by step 8, many users have updated your application. And this goes back to our timeline of September 30th as a recommended time to have at least have the historical backfill and sync servers turned on. So that way your users will have enough time as of step 6 when you're releasing the web and mobile app to begin migrating gradually from between SendBird and layer. So from layer to SendBird, we support some of these data mapping. So on the SendBird side, conversations are called group channels, messages, and we have users. So let's dive into these. As said before, conversations become group channels, and we actually take the conversation UUID and map that to the channel URL in SendBird. Unfortunately, because of the nature of layers creation of conversations, we cannot map SendBird channel URLs directly back to layer conversation UUIDs if that channel is created after the SendBird SDK has been rolled out. Conversation members that were a part of the layer conversation are still members inside the SendBird group channels. So we shouldn't have any trouble supporting all of your members, as layer had a cap of about 25 users inside of their conversations as their participants, and SendBird has up to 100 members by default in our group channels. SendBird also supports distinct channels for group channels, and there is a concept of distinct conversations over in layer. So we do a one-to-one mapping on that, and that means that we can support either one-on-one chats or chats that have a small intimate group of people that have a specific membership. So if users are coming back and revisiting the same chat over and over, that's a distinct channel. Messages. So layer text messages become message type messages in SendBird. File messages become file type messages, but when SendBird actually sends a file message back to layer, it's going to be sending it as a URL because we are going to have that file message hosted on our server side in SendBird's S3. And so we will send it over as a layer text only message with the URL inside. So it's important here to be able to render those URLs from files. And from the layer side, when we're receiving layer files, we're actually going to download those files and upload them to SendBird's S3. So you don't have to worry that even though layer service may go offline, that you will lose those file messages. We will store them on SendBird side. Next is the message data fields are supported. So if you have any custom data that you threw in there, we are going to try to support that. MIME types become custom types in SendBird. So MIME types you may have seen in layer or text plain or image, JPEG, things like that, or location. Some people use locations for their message types, and those become location custom type in SendBird. Users, we do a one-to-one mapping between user IDs. So it's really easy to identify which users are on SendBird and on Layer. Direct mapping of the display names for Layer users to SendBird user nicknames. We also take the URLs that are listed for their profile picture and put those into the user's profile URL. And of course, user metadata is also supported. So if you have any rich data in there on that user, we're going to copy that over. So there are some limitations to migration, and that's just the nature of working between two services. So one limitation that we have today is the Layer URLs that are not part of the file message are not stored in SendBird's S3. This includes user avatar URLs, or the Layer URLs listed inside of user and conversation metadata. So the ones particularly listed in metadata are very hard for us to detect and actually upload to SendBird. We don't support user-to-user blocking as a migration limitation. Unread counts, read receipts, typing indicators between Layer and SendBird. These are a lot of real-time events that we're not supporting. We just think that it will cause a lot of really awkward noise between Layer and SendBird at that time. That said, when you do roll out on the SendBird side, you will have things that you can do for user-to-user blocking, unread counts, read receipts, all that, and typing indicators, all of the great real-time actions that you're familiar with. Sending of rich content from Layer is not supported in the live migration steps, so file messages, they'll be sent as the URL as mentioned before in the text message, rather than as a rich content message part. And updates to conversation users or messages are not detected, so we can't update those, including if a Layer message part was updated. So with our migration, we have some service guarantees because we want to make sure that this runs very smoothly for you. So backfill migration of historical messages, we're promising to do that, of course. Real-time processing and delivery of webhook to the corresponding API call. This is talking about how the sync server listens to webhook events and sends it off to, between Layer and SendBird accordingly. SendBird, we're going to cover the monitoring and operation of the sync server infrastructure, the hosting, any logging, all of that stuff is handled for you. We're going to do best effort real-time synchronization of messages, channels, and users between Layer and SendBird. So if the sync server detects that a message is coming in, we're going to deliver that. In the event that a conversation has not been created on SendBird's side yet, we are going to create that conversation, and same thing with users. So if we have not seen a user yet in SendBird's side, we're not going to just drop the message. We're going to create the user and then send that message for that user. File storage on SendBird servers for file messages is going to be remain accessible after Layer shutdown. We know how important those file messages are for a lot of you, so we want to make sure that those stick around after Layer goes down. And I'm going to hand it over at this point to my colleague Alex Preston, and he's going to talk to you about how to get started with your Layer migration.
Thank you, Jenna. So the form that you guys are seeing right here, we're going to send it out to you guys as an email attachment after this meeting. This form is to jumpstart the process. So in order to get a very clean, quick segue into the POC phase, we're going to need a couple of things from you. Some of the generic things are just who you are, app IDs that you've created for SendBird, Layer, etc. But the main things you'll see actually at the bottom of this form is we're going to request that you give us a sample data set for your user messages, or your users, your messages, your conversations. And we want you to give us as robust of a use case as you have. Sometimes as robust of a use case for your users, your messages, your conversations. This is because we're going to take that information and this is how we're going to handle the mapping for the sync server part of this. So the more information that you can give us, the easier the process will be, the less back and forth that we'll have to do with you trying to clarify different things. And we're going to essentially just take that information you give us and we're going to show it what it looks like and show you how it's going to look in a SendBird object for users, for channels, for messages. So that way it'll be a very clean and quick process. The last thing that we're going to request that you do is, and I know I mentioned a month on here, but just an X amount of time, we're going to need some backfilled data. This again is for the POC phase that Janna was talking about. This will help us backfill a little bit of data so you can see during the POC phase synchronization happening, see histories of chats up until whatever point you give us data-wise. So that way you guys can just verify from your end and we can verify from our end that, hey, everything's working perfectly fine and it's all good and clean to go. So those are the few things that you're going to see in this form. We're also going to send out a kind of more of a technical deep dive into all things SendBird as well after this. It's just going to be like a 101 getting started. It's going to go over things like moderation, webhooks, push notifications, just all that kind of fun stuff. So all of this stuff is kind of geared to make the onboarding process as quick and painless as can be. With that, I think we can segue into the Q&A section. So if anyone has questions, if not, we have a couple of frequently asked questions that we generally get asked a lot. And so if no one has any questions, we can kind of answer some of those ones, just make clear up any confusion for you guys.
Cool. So let me go ahead and ask you guys a few questions. The first question that came up is, how does a sync server know my app?
So that's a part of the configuration when we set up the sync server. So as I mentioned in the form that we're sending out, it's going to have your app ID and your, for both Layer and SendBird. So it's going to be a part of the configuration that we're going to set up where we let the sync server know that, hey, this is the app ID. And in this case, for the POC phase, it'll be your dev or staging application that you use, and vice versa for your Layer, you should use your dev or your staging application, whatever you guys are calling it on that end. And so when we set that up, that'll help the where we use webhooks to communicate between the two, and that'll help the process. It'll help the apps know, obviously, who the other app is, and it'll allow the communication to happen for the real-time synchronization.
Another question that came up is, how can I check if my message migrated?
So there's a number of ways to check if your message migrated. As you know, we've talked a lot about is we're doing a POC phase where we kind of show how everything is working from a live stance. And so what you can do is from our dashboard, you can look into channels and conversations and see messages from there, or we can provide you can use a sample app using our JavaScript sample app, our Android, our iOS app, and you'll be able to see all the list of conversations. If we do a backfill of data, you'll be able to see the messages that were migrated on the SendBird application, or your application using SendBird, and you'll be able to see all the messages that you would see also using your Layer application.
Thank you. Another question is, how does sync server start without any data?
So Janna actually covered this in a couple of slides ago, where we talked about how things can get created on the fly. So if you send a message in SendBird to someone who's using the Layer application, what it'll do is it'll check with Layer to see if that user ID exists or if that channel exists already in Layer. And if it doesn't, it'll create that. So that'll help keep that data persistent and make sure that even if you don't have any data on the SendBird application because you haven't done a backfill, or maybe it's just a new conversation, the sync server does a really good job of creating things as it goes by just mapping things. If you send a message just send a generic user message, it'll take the user ID, create a user ID on Layer or a channel conversation on Layer, and then it'll help make the process. It'll be something that from a user perspective, you won't even know happens.
Another question is, how does pricing work?
So pricing is kind of a use case. It's dependent on a case-by-case basis. It largely depends on how much data you're migrating and how many your total monthly active users. And so that's something that you'll probably work with your AE on and figuring out a pricing that works well for you. So it's kind of a hard thing to generically answer for everyone.
Cool. We had a question that came in. How do you migrate media messages like photos and videos?
Yeah, so media messages are going to come in as file messages to SendBird. And and those will get uploaded to SendBird into our S3 bucket. So that way it can be stored on the SendBird side. So if layer goes offline, then you still have access to that, those media files.
So to like piggyback on that, sometimes some of the use cases we've had is people say, well, what if the files or the messages or the file messages are encrypted on like the layer side, and vice versa? What if we turn on file encryption for the SendBird side? Obviously, that does cause issues, and Janna did highlight a little bit on this in the in her deep dive. If file encryption is turned on from a SendBird side during during the sync server migration part, there's 3-ish cases that can happen. Is one, it'll send a URL that will be inaccessible. That's the nature of file encryption. There's literally no way that layer, because the application has not been updated, it's on the device, there's no way that they would know that that file exists. So unfortunately, those file messages would just kind of show up blank. But once people are off the sync server, then you wouldn't see that issue anymore, because everyone would be on SendBird, you had file encryption, everything would work perfectly.
Right.
And vice versa, when we're taking messages from file encryption on layer side, part of the stuff that you'll give us will be able to request those files with the proper authentication, so we can migrate those files over to SendBird. There's other options that you can do is during the timeline, if you do want to make sure that no file messages or pictures or videos break, you can make them public. You can not turn on file encryption from a SendBird side, and essentially what will happen then is it'll just be sharing publicly shareable URLs, so it'll still work. It's just at that point you would not have file encryption on those individual pictures or videos.
All right, another question. Can SendBird do offline caching?
Yes, so like Layer, they do offline caching. We have what we call our sync manager. As a part of the documentations we'll give you, it kind of goes into the deep dives, it'll talk more about this. And our sync manager is just our SDK as a means of caching messages offline in a database on the individual device. It's very easy to use, very easy to implement. It provides for a much better and cleaner user experience from a user perspective. In the event that they lose internet connection, it handles it a lot better because their messages won't suddenly disappear, as they will all be cached offline.
And the last question, and I think Jen answered this already, but we're going to ask it again. How soon can migration start?
So as I said, that form a slide ago is actually the jump starting process. So realistically, as soon as you get us that form, we can get the ball rolling on everything else. Because the first thing that we need to do is see what your data looks like, show how we're going to map it. If there's any edge cases, work that out with you, so that way you're not blindsided or surprised in terms of what we're doing with your data. So as soon as you fill out that form and get us sent off to us, we can get started immediately and roll right into the POC phase, and then from then on.
All right, well, I think that's it for the questions that we received. So this will conclude our webinar for today. Thank you so much again for joining us for one of SendBird's first webinar. We hope to see you at the next one. Thank you.
Thank you.